do this. Everybody else, they think they can, I can do it. And he starts going through and he just finishes problem 8 when the bell rings and the professor says, time's up, bring your papers up, you're finished. And he walks up and he lays his paper down, crushed that he didn't get to the 2 final problems, not knowing what his future held. And he starts to leave and he turns back and he says, Professor, and they know this may sound weird, but would you give me until later today or tomorrow to finish up the final those 2 problems on the board? And the professor kind of looked and laughed and said, sure, I'm not leaving town until tomorrow. That's fine, just lay it on my desk. And he laughs at him. And so George leaves and he goes home. And he starts working on the problems. He works the rest of that day, that evening, into the night, and he keeps giving up. He cannot get it. But every time he laid it down, he said, no, if they're on the board, they can be accomplished. Somebody's going to get it right. Why can't it be me? And finally, early in the morning, he finishes 9, and he keeps working on 10. And finally, in the morning, he finishes it. Very tiredly, he walks over, knocks on the professor's door. He's not there. He lays the 2 problems down on his desk and leaves. Goes back to his room and falls asleep. He sleeps until Saturday morning. And Saturday morning, he hears a pound on the door. And he gets up and he goes to the door and opens it and goes, hi, Professor, what are you doing here? I thought you were going to be gone. And the professor said, I was going to leave. But George, you've done mathematical history. You've done mathematical history. He said, what are you talking about? He said, George, you came into my class late. I forgot about that. When you walked in, I already talked to the students. I said, students, your tests are problems 1 through 8 on your paper. I've had you for 4 years, and you've been a blessing. But now you will leave and go into the world, and I don't know where you will go, but I wish you the best. And as you go, here are 2 problems I've written on the board that have never been completed in the history of mathematics. He said Einstein went to his death never being able to complete these, and you won't either. But have fun trying. He said, I never put doubt into you. You thought it was possible. And you did the impossible. George got that assistant teacher's job, and he went on to be a very high-ranking officer eventually with the Air Force, dealing with mathematics in every way. But why did it happen? Because he believed the impossible. Can I tell you, folks, that we live in the world of the impossible? But may I remind you that there is someone that is greater than the impossible. It's our God. God Jehovah, that says, when the world says it's impossible, my God says it is possible. And I want you to realize today that you face things every day that when doubt creeps in, you say, no, I've got a God that has my life in his hands. Folks, you live in a world where people come against you because of what you believe and what you do. But can I remind you that when you believe that God can help you, when you stand at work and all of a sudden you see somebody with a look of strain on their face because of death or sickness or finances or relationships, and they're saying, life is impossible. It is impossible. When you walk up because God directs you and you just say, hey, I see you've got a lot on your mind. I want you to know I'm thinking about you today, and I'm praying for you. You've just given them a chance to think of the possible. Young people, I want to remind you that when you're at school and you see someone sitting at the table by themselves because they don't have any friends, because everyone thinks they dress different or talk different, and sometimes those kids think, man, if I can't find life, I'll take death and I'll take people with me. When you see somebody by themselves and you walk over and say, hey, why don't you sit with me? What happens if your friends get upset? Then they're not true friends in the first place. But when you stand up and say, hey, come and sit with me, you just give them a chance to say, maybe life is possible. Folks, Africa's the mission field. Europe's the mission field. But can I remind you, when you walk out those doors and you get out of here, you are in the mission field. And God wants you to be people of compassion. He wants you to be people of faith, that to believe the impossible for your family, for your friends, for your community. You see, these men, not only did they believe in compassion. Oh man, pick them up. We got to do something. What? We can't know. If we get to Jesus, we know a miracle's going to happen. They were full of faith, and they start walking over, and they get there, and all of a sudden, oh man, there's so many people. We can't even get up here. And somebody says, oh, you might as well turn back. And one looks at the other and says, where there's a will, there's a way. We're going to do this. You see, they were people of determination. They were determined. They were not going to let anything get in their way. It's like an ant pushing a rock up a hill. Determined. What is determination? Determination is a positive emotion that involves persevering toward a difficult goal in spite of obstacles. Firmness of purpose, resolution. It's saying it's gonna happen. It's final. I'm not stepping back. And what happens? These men walk up the steps. They get up there going, all right, guys, homeowner's not gonna like this. And they start tearing away the sticks, the branches, the manure. They start pulling everything away until they dug a hole. You know what, when I get to heaven, I want to say, Jesus, what'd you think when all that stuff started falling down on your head? They tore it away. And when they did that, determination made a miracle happen. Determination. When we moved to Kenya, God began to open doors. And I know that God, I think, was thrilled with what was happening. But how do you know that Satan, he wants you defeated? He isn't happy with things that happen. We are living in our house, and in Kenya, thievery is a very big thing. Every window had bars on it. Our door had a metal gate you would close, because if you didn't have metal, they'd put a big old rock in a potato sack and slam it against a wooden door and knock it off its hinges. And they'd come rushing in. And in the area where we lived, there was a gang hitting the houses. We would hear screams at night. They would beat people up. They even killed some. I had a guard that worked from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. And his whole purpose was, number one, to stay awake. But the other thing was to be a guard. And if he saw anything, he would hit an alarm that when he hit it was just a simple and hopefully would scare them away. We lived in a stone house. It was African made. It was kind of a little slanted, 3 levels. When it rained, the water would come in the upper little patio and run down the stairs and go out the front door. It's kind of cool. My son tried to make a water slide. But on November 14th, at 3 o'clock in the morning, we were all asleep, and I heard, and I hit the alarm clock and realized it wasn't my alarm clock. It was the alarm on the house. It said 3 a.m. I jumped up and my wife jumped up and we could hear the windows being shattered. We could hear the bars being slammed against. And my wife said, I'll get the kids. She ran and grabbed Tanya, Shauna, and Clayton and went to the upper level, tried to go up through a hole in an attic, up into the attic next to the water tank, but couldn't get up there. I ran to the window, and wheezy, thieves, thieves! And they began to throw stones against the small window. I went and I looked down into the darkness and I said, what do you want? And in broken Kenya English, the man said, bring us keys. They wanted the keys to unlock the door, but I knew they'd be coming in, and I got up to my wife, and she was hanging up the phone, and I said, who'd you call? She said, I called the police. She said they could come in about 14 hours once they get a ride, because there just wasn't transportation. And we stood there and said, God, we're in your hands. We trust you. And we waited for them to come up the stairs, and they didn't. And the noise began to die away, and all of a sudden I heard a pebble hit the window, and I looked down, and it was my guard, Philip. And he said, Tafadali and Johaba, please come here. And I came outside, and I said, Iko Sawa Sawa, is everything okay? He said, Iko Sawa Sawa. I said, what happened? And as he turned, I could see where he was bleeding. And he said, 15 men came over the bamboo fence. And when they saw me, they stoned me. And he said, they stoned the dogs. That's why they didn't bark. And he said, I made it to the alarm and I turned it on and then I hid in the bush. And I said, why didn't they come in the house? He said, see, Jewy, I don't know. So I walked around outside and saw all the mud from the swamp up onto the deck. And I looked at the window and you could see where they took a bolt cutter. A big bolt cutter, and they had snapped out the first bar, snapped out the second bar. The third bar, they started to cut, and they stopped. It did not make sense. If they would have cut that out, it would have opened up a slider area, would have put all of them into my house. And I went around to the house and down into the darkness, praying that they weren't in there somehow. And I got down to turn on the light, and my wife's purse and our passports, everything was there except for the VCR, the video player. It was gone. And I saw the little muddy footprints of a child where they put him through the little opening and they'd gone over, taken the VCR and left. And I thought, why didn't they keep coming? And I looked at the window and thought, what went on? What? And I reached down on the floor, and what I picked up was the blade to the bolt cutter. That blade, there's two of them, and they come together and they can crush metal. But somehow as they went to cut that third bar, one of the blades snapped off and they couldn't come in. I got to tell you, 3 hours later, I never went to sleep. They put 1.5-inch bars on all our windows, the mission. But we kept saying, God, thank you for protecting us. But it wasn't until 5 weeks later, 2 days before Christmas, I found out what God had done. I received a letter in the mail from a mother in Indianapolis, Indiana. She said, Missionary J. Risner, you came to our church and you shared with us that you were moving to Africa. And you gave all the people prayer cards. You know, a prayer card has our family picture and all our information. But she said, you do something that nobody else does. You gave prayer cards to all the children. You told the children to take one. But my son Andy, who is 9.5, took 3. One he put on the refrigerator. One he put in the bathroom. And one he carries to school every day to pray for you. She said, something happened on November 13th that I must tell you about. She said, Andy came home from school very agitated. He's somewhat autistic. And he just said, we got to pray for the Risners. We got to pray. Well, Andy, we pray every night for them. No, Mom, we've got to pray now. We've got to pray now. She said, I said, wait till your dad gets home, and then we'll pray. And at 5 minutes to 7, Indiana time, the father walked in and Andy gathered up his brothers and sisters. She said they started around praying, the mother, the father, the two brothers, a sister, and when it got to Andy, Andy prayed, God, protect the Risners. Protect the Risners behind the bars. She looked at her son and said, what do you mean behind the bars? Are you talking about where people go to drink and they dance and that type of bar? And I said, no, Mommy. I was at school and I went out to play and I had promised my friends that I would play basketball with them because I'm one of the best, Mommy. But I got out there and I started feeling like I had to pray for the Risners. So I sat down against the fence and I pulled out their picture and my friends began to make fun of me that I wasn't playing and I almost went to play. But I made up my mind I was going to pray. And while I was praying,